Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you are well. Today I am starting my July wrap up as I speak. We are about a week into July and this month has got off to an interesting reading start. First of all, I just want to mention something of note. So this morning I went to my library book club, and we had read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail, Honeyman, which I wrapped up in my June wrap up. And not only did we all finish the book without DNFing, we all really enjoyed the book. And I cannot remember the last time that happened. So it was a momentous occasion. I wanted to record it on camera forevermore. But anyway, in terms of what I've read so far this month, so July got off to a great start because the first book I picked up was Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne and Valente. So this is a book I've been meaning to read for a while, and I finally picked up a copy a few months ago. I think it was Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, whose channel I will link down below, who I first heard about this from. It's a very short book. It's only about 100 pages long, and it's it has that real feeling of quiet creeping dread throughout it, which I think is my favourite mood in a book. So it's about Sophia, who lives in this what would we call it, a residential area. And this area where she lives, it has all these rules which we are introduced to at the start of the book, rules about what you can and can't do in this area. So, for example, there's rules about how you have to keep your garden, keeping the sidewalks free of clutter, no overnight guests, tranquility hours after 8:10 p.m. and all day on Sunday. So there's all these various rules that we find out about as we go through the book. So Sophia is married. She lives with her husband, and her husband works away quite a lot, and Sophia is not quite sure exactly what her husband does and what he's doing while he works away. So there's a little bit of mystery and suspicion there. And we follow Sophia as she interacts with the other residents of this sort of like residential area. And yeah, I didn't guess where this was going, but the clues are there. I can see how you could guess where this is going, and I don't think that would necessarily spoil it for you if you did guess where it was going. I mean, I picked up some of the clues, but I definitely didn't get it all. I really liked where it went. It was very satisfying. I do like it when a book does that, where you know something's a bit off, you're not quite sure where it's going, and then when all is revealed, it's just very satisfying. I really enjoyed this. If you like sort of quiet horror, this is one I would definitely recommend. And then I have two DNFs. These are both books that I have received over the last sort of year or so, my monthly book subscription box. So the first is States of Passion by Nihad Sirees. This is translated from Arabic by Max Weiss. The author is from Syria, and this has an interesting premise, so I was keen to read this. So we have this man who finds himself stranded in the countryside in the middle of a storm, and he finds refuge in this grand house where this old man lives, and so he's sort of like trapped in this house for a little bit. And so this old man starts telling him these stories, and the stories are about these sort of centre around these places that are called, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Banat al-Ishra, where there is groups of women who sort of live together. And the reason I DNF'd it was because it came across as quite male-gazy and just a bit icky. Like, you've got a male author, and you've got one male character describing to another male character these women, and it was just a bit icky. So I DNF'd it. And that seems to be, on Googling it, the general perception of this book. So I think that was a wise decision. And then I picked up The Icelands by Steinar Bragi. This is translated from Icelandic by Lorenzo Garcia. I read 82 pages. The bookmark can come out now. And this is another one that sounded really, really interesting. So there's a group of 4 30-year-olds, 2 couples who are travelling on some camping trip, and they get stuck, like their car breaks down or something. They end up going to this farmhouse where this elderly couple live. And according to the blurb, this is a mysterious elderly couple who barricade themselves in this farmhouse, and there's, mysterious goings on. It sounds really, really interesting, but it was just really, really slow paced and quite dull. So it starts off where we get sort of like backstories of different of these characters. That was kind of a bit dull. I think the point I DNF'd it, the main characters were having this conversation about like conservation and the environment, and it read like the author just wanted to write an essay about that theme. It was very stilted, this conversation, so it was just too dull. It just wasn't going anywhere quick enough for me, so I did DNF that as well. So, I am getting through the books on my shelves so far. I'm actually in the middle of 4 books at the moment. Unusual for me. I will check back in once I have read or DNF'd another book. Hello, it is now almost 2 weeks later, and I have some more books to talk about. We're not quite at the end of the month yet. Cat Lady by Dawn O'Porter. I have mixed feelings about this book. It's about Mia, who lives with her husband and stepson and her cat called Pigeon. And Pigeon is what gives Mia's life meaning, basically. And at the start of the book, we see Mia joining this sort of bereavement support group for people whose pets have died. And Mia goes to this group even though Pigeon is still alive, and she sort of allows the other members of the group to assume that Mia is there because her pet has died, when in fact that isn't the case. But Mia goes to the group and gets a lot of comfort from the other people in the group, because she feels this sort of preemptive grief for the death of Pigeon, whenever that might happen in the future. My issue with the book was mainly the fact that there was a few parts of it where I thought the humour was really off. 1 or 2 parts in particular where I found it wholly inappropriate and quite offensive, and it was meant to be funny, and it wasn't. So that was my main issue with the book. I did keep reading till the end. There is something quite traumatic that happens in the book, and I had to put it to one side for a few days and stop reading it. I had to put the book out of my sight because I couldn't even look at it. And I actually thought to myself jokingly, maybe I should put it in the freezer, like Joey in Friends. We have no room in our freezer, it's full of ice cream. But anyway, and then when I went back to the book a few days later, it just got even more upsetting. And if you have read the book, you know what I'm talking about. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, because clearly it provoked a reaction in me. It was meant to be sad, and it was very sad. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. But I would say approach with caution. If you are a pet lover, you may find parts of this difficult to read for that reason. I have a few DNFs to talk about. The first is Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore by Robin Sloan. I actually read about half of this. So it's about this guy, this young lad who goes to work in a bookstore, and he works the evening shift, the night shift. And at the back of the bookstore there are these sort of mysterious books, and when he sort of sneaks a look at them one time, the books, they're just like a mash of letters, like they don't mean anything. Or he can't work out what they mean. And the bookstore has these sort of mysterious visitors who will come and they're allowed to take these special books. Anyway, the point I DNF'd, I think they were sort of embarking on some sort of quest, figuring out some secret about this bookstore. I wasn't really very interested. The main thing that did annoy me a bit was this guy does have a love interest who he meets early on in the book, this girl. And she very much seemed to me like she was just there as his love interest with no character of her own. So that kind of annoyed me. So I've DNF'd that one. And then I have 2 more books that I have DNF'd, but I think with both of these they're going to be DNFs for now. I was in sort of a weird mood last week and I was quite out of sorts. So anyway, these I think are going to go back on my shelf, but I'll tell you what they are. This is A Brief Stay with the Living by Marie, I still don't know how to pronounce this name, Darrieussecq. It's translated from the French by Ian Monk. And I am interested to go back to this one because it's about a woman and her 3 grown-up daughters, and one of whom still lives with her, the other 2 live elsewhere, and the story switches between their 4 viewpoints, so we get like a few pages of each, and it goes round in circles, and it's pure stream of consciousness, so it's all sort of quite hazy as you're reading it. You're trying to sort of like pick up the meaning in what they are thinking, and you sort of get these little insights into things that has happened in the past, and I think it's going to be a lot about grief. So I am interested to give this another go, but I'm just not in the mood for this type of book written in this type of way right now. And the other one, which I think is going to be a DNF, well, how many pages did I read of that? 60, not bad. The other one, which I think is going to be a DNF for now, is We Begin at the End by Whitaker. I read 52 pages of this one. I couldn't even tell you what it was about. None of this went into my head. This was quite a popular crime book when it was first published a few years ago. And I haven't really given it a fair chance, so it's a DNF for now. But in exciting news, if you watched my June wrap-up, I had my first 5-star read of the year. That was I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay. I did an individual book review video of that, which I will leave down below. So that was my first 5-star of the year, and hot on the heels of that one, we have another 5-star read. And this one was quite a surprise to me because it wasn't a book I had heard that much about. Kind of similar to the Rebecca Mackay, actually. I was sort of aware of it, didn't really go into it with any expectations, but this is Big Swiss by Jen Began, and I absolutely loved it. I had such a great time reading this book. So this is about Greta, who works as a transcriptionist set in New York. So she works from home, typing up these recordings of client interviews from this sex therapist. So this is what she does for her work. She, obviously for confidentiality reasons, doesn't know who any of these clients are. She only knows them by their initials. But occasionally when she is out and about, she happens to overhear a voice that she knows is someone that she's like typed up a recording of. And Greta starts to become increasingly obsessed with one of the clients of this sex therapist whose note she is typing. And Greta obviously doesn't know the client's real name. She sort of in her mind refers to her as Big Swiss because she is Swiss and she imagines her as sort of being tall and imposing. And this sort of obsession grows until one day, and this is all on the blurb, she happens to meet Big Swiss in the park, and she immediately realises that this is Big Swiss. Big Swiss, of course, has no idea who Greta is. And a relationship develops between the two of them. And Greta does not own up to the fact that she knows a lot about Big Swiss. So Greta is sort of fairly kind of unlikable a little bit. Not like majorly unlikable, but just nicely unlikable to make it interesting. And I found the book really funny as well. So even once they start seeing each other, Greta is still typing the notes from Big Swiss's meetings with the sex therapist. And so we get sections in the book of this transcription of the interview, and every so often we'll get these little interjections from Greta where she hears what Big Swiss is saying, because of course Big Swiss mentions the fact that she's met this new woman to the therapist. So I found it very, very funny. I am going to do an individual book review video actually, which I'll probably film right now. So I won't say anything more. There are some more sort of serious themes going on in here as well. I thought that was really, really nicely balanced between the humour and the more serious stuff. But yeah, I loved it. Check out my individual book review video if you would like to hear my full thoughts. Right, we'll wrap up this reading wrap up. I still have all these books to talk about, but it may or may not surprise you to hear that half of these are DNFs. So, should we go for the DNFs first? I have been in a bit of a funny reading month in July. I looked on Storygraph. I think I've read 6 books and DNF like 8 books, which is a high DNF rate even for me. I think it's because I have maybe been in a bit of a reading slump and not quite being able to settle down into anything. But some of the DNFs, as I've mentioned, are books I do want to go back to in future. And this is one of them, The Chimes by Anna Smale. This is quite a weird book, and I didn't read very much of it before I decided that my brain could just not take this level of weirdness right now. But I would like to revisit it in future, but it will go back to the library for now. Next DNF was My Murder by Katie Williams, and this is one I'm not going to bother going back to. It's about these women who have been killed by this serial killer, and then the women are cloned, so kind of brought back to life, and it just wasn't terribly good. My next DNF was a book that I was reading for my book club. This is Something I'm Not by Lucy Beresford. I read to page 26 and I found this offensive towards various different groups of people, which I thought was quite an accomplishment in a mere 26 pages. It was offensive in the sense that there were one-liners which were meant to be funny and they just were not, they were just offensive. And the final DNF, and I'm sorry to those of you who love this book, but it was Birnam Wood by Eleanor Carton. I read about 130 pages of this, so I feel like I gave it a decent go. But I was bored. I really wanted to like it. It sounded interesting to me because it's been marketed as a literary thriller. The blurbs on the back sound great. Like, there's a blurb from Stephen King, not that I'm a massive Stephen King fan, but who describes it as a multi-layered, character-driven thriller. And I was just bored. You know, I'm sure it gets pacier, further into the book. But, yeah. I feel like Eleanor Catton probably is not for me because I have also DNF'd The Luminaries as well. But on to some books that I have read and have enjoyed. And first is a short story collection. This is A Table Near the Band by A.A. Milne. So this was a nice surprise. I picked this up at a charity shop a little while ago and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So the stories are all about a variety of different characters. They're described as being vignettes of everyday life. But what I liked about it was each of the stories I thought was really well plotted within itself, and each of the stories had like a satisfying ending, whether that's a little reveal or things were wrapped up nicely, and that's what I like about short stories, is when they're really well plotted. There was only one in here that I didn't like, all the others I really, really enjoyed. Then I read Rilla of Ingleside by L.M. Montgomery. So this is the 8th and final novel in the Anne of Green Gables series. There are 2 short story collections as well. And this is my first time reading this book. Now, I love Anne of Green Gables. It's one of my favourite books of all time. And I have read the first 6 novels in that series many, many times over my lifetime. And it was only a few years ago that I found out that there was a book 7 and a book 8 in the series that I had never been aware of. So last year I read book 7, which was Rainbow Valley, and this Rilla of Ingleside is book 8. And the reason I never knew there was a book 7 and a book 8 is because the copies of the books I had as a child on the inside cover only listed the first 6 books. Books 7 and 8 were definitely published then because these books are like 100 years old. And I have for you, Exhibit A, this is one of those books. And in the front it says The Anne Books by L.M. Montgomery in reading order, and it lists 6 books. So I don't know why I was misled for all those years, but anyway, it was nice 30 years after starting the series to finally finish it. I enjoyed this. It's not one of my favourite from the series. Rilla is Anne's youngest child. As the book opens, she's about 15 years old, and she's quite similar to how Anne was as a child. So she's quite a fun character to read about. The book has quite a sombre undertone because it's set just before and during the First World War. So some members of the family and friends go off to fight. So it does have a solemn tone throughout, but there are some sort of like more light-hearted moments as well. But yes, nice to finally finish that series. Then I read Pageboy by Elliot Page. This is a memoir, and I thought this was very, very good. So this is about Elliot's life, his childhood, becoming a Hollywood star, coming out and then coming out again. It's quite a difficult read at times because there's abuse, there's sexual assault, homophobia, transphobia, eating disorders, suicidal ideation. There's a lot going on. It's quite a confronting read, but I thought it was very, very good. I feel like I've read something else, but maybe I haven't. The other book I wanted to talk about, which I haven't yet finished, is this mammoth. This is The Locked Room Mysteries, the most complete collection of impossible crime stories ever assembled, and it's edited by Otto Penzler. This is massive. This is basically like a textbook. I've read that much. It doesn't look like I've read very much, but I've read a number of stories. This is over 900 pages long. It contains between 60 and 70 stories, and I'm very much enjoying it. So some of the stories are sort of like more classic, well-known stories, like Murder in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe is in here. There's a Sherlock Holmes story. There's a story by Wilkie Collins. And then there's various sort of like Golden Age crime authors. John Dixon Carr is in here, who's the master of the Locked Room Mystery. Yeah, some authors I've read from before. Some authors I've never heard of. There's an Agatha Christie in there. I'm very much enjoying this. Locked Room Mysteries is one of my favourite tropes of crime fiction. So this is ideal for me. I will be reading this sporadically over the coming months and or years. So those are all the books that I read in July. Let me know what you've been reading and let me know if you've read any of these books. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.